What if one simple traffic stop exposed everything someone spent months trying to prove? Because in just a few minutes, King Harris went from talking tough online to being in handcuffs, with 50 Cent watching, waiting, and ready to turn it into a viral moment. And once that post hit, the internet didn't just react, it exploded. What if one moment, just a routine traffic stop, ended up exposing everything someone had been trying so hard to prove? Because that's exactly what happened when King Harris got pulled over, and from the very first second, you could feel this wasn't going to be a normal interaction. The officer's voice was firm, controlled, but already on edge. There was a firearm visible in the vehicle, sitting right there on the dashboard, and that instantly changed the tone. This wasn't just about speeding anymore. This became a situation. At first it sounded simple: step out of the car, that's it. A basic instruction, but instead of complying, King hesitated. He questioned it, he pushed back. And in moments like that, hesitation doesn't calm things down, it escalates them. Because from the officer's perspective, you've got a speeding vehicle, a visible weapon, and a driver refusing to follow instructions. That combination never ends quietly. What makes this moment hit harder is everything surrounding it. This wasn't just some random person caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is the son of T.I., someone who's been in the spotlight, someone who's been building an image, loud, confident, fearless. For months, King Harris had been presenting himself as someone ready for anything. The tough persona, the energy, the attitude that said he wasn't to be tested. And people were watching, closely. Because when you build your identity around being untouchable, the world doesn't just believe it. They wait for the moment it gets tested. And when that moment finally comes, there's no hiding from it. This stop should have been nothing. A ticket, maybe a warning, and it's over. But the second that instruction was ignored, everything shifted. The officer wasn't asking anymore. He was repeating himself, making it clear this was no longer optional. And instead of de-escalating, King kept resisting, delaying, arguing. Every second stretched the situation tighter. And then came the detail that made the entire internet explode. Not just the arrest, not just the firearm, not even the reported substances, but what he was wearing. A Pikachu onesie. Something that in any other situation might have been harmless or even funny suddenly became the symbol of the entire moment. Because now, this wasn't just serious, it was surreal. But the real turning point wasn't even the arrest itself. It was what happened after. Because when things got too real, when the situation moved beyond control, there was one move left. He called his father. And at around 1 a.m., T.I. had to show up and step into the situation. That's when the narrative shifted completely. Because now people weren't just looking at King Harris. They were looking at the pattern, the safety net, the idea that no matter how far things go, there's always someone there to step in and fix it. And that's where the conversation got uncomfortable. Because this wasn't the first time. Reports had already suggested previous run-ins, previous situations that didn't quite go the way they should have. Moments where consequences could have been heavier, but weren't. And every time that happens, it builds a perception. Not just of the person, but of how they're being handled. And while all of this was happening in real life, something else was waiting in the background, watching, silent. Because King hadn't just been dealing with personal issues, he had been publicly going at 50 Cent. Not casually, not jokingly, but aggressively. Posting, talking, pushing boundaries that most people wouldn't even approach. And if you know anything about 50 Cent, you already know how dangerous that is. He doesn't rush. He doesn't react emotionally. He waits. He watches. And most importantly, he lets the moment build until it's impossible to ignore. Then he strikes. So while King was online building this tough image, throwing shots, making noise, real life was setting the stage for something else entirely. Because the truth is, it's easy to look fearless on social media. It's easy to talk like nothing can touch you, but reality doesn't move like that. Reality tests you without warning. And when those police lights came on, when that instruction was given, When that moment demanded control, discipline, and awareness, everything shifted. Because this wasn't about image anymore. This wasn't about perception. This was real. And in real situations, there's no filter, no second take, no way to edit how you respond. That's why this moment hit so hard. Not just because of the arrest, not just because of the details, but because it exposed the gap between the image and the reality. The difference between how someone presents themselves and how they actually move when pressure shows up. And once that gap is exposed, the internet doesn't let it go. Clips start circulating, reactions start building, narratives form instantly, and in this case, it all collided at the worst possible time. Because now, the same audience that had been watching him talk, watching him build that persona, was watching something completely different unfold. And right behind that, 50 Cent, watching, waiting. Because moments like this is exactly what he looks for. Not something staged, not something forced, but something real that speaks for itself. And once that door opens, he doesn't just respond, he amplifies it. So what started as a simple traffic stop didn't just turn into an arrest. It turned into a moment that reshaped how people see King Harris overnight. A moment that raised questions about accountability, about image, about reality versus perception. And the worst part, this wasn't the end of it. Because once the internet gets involved, once the reactions start, once someone like 50 Cent steps in, it doesn't slow down, it escalates. And from here, everything only gets worse. Legal, simple, clear. The kind of situation that usually ends in minutes, but not this time. Because when the officer gave that command, step out of the vehicle, it wasn't a suggestion. It was the moment everything could have been resolved. And King Harris refused, not once, not twice, multiple times. He questioned it, pushed back, delayed, even claimed he didn't feel safe. And right there, that decision flipped the entire situation. Think about it. One action, just stepping out, could have de-escalated everything. The tension, the suspicion, the risk. It all could have disappeared in seconds. But instead of choosing the path that ends the situation, he chose the one that stretches it, complicates it, and ultimately turns it into something much bigger. Because in moments like that, hesitation isn't neutral, it's escalation. The officer didn't rush. He didn't jump straight to force. He explained it again. There's a firearm in the vehicle. You're speeding. We need to separate you from the weapon. Clear reasoning. Standard procedure. But King didn't move. He stayed planted, questioning, resisting, dragging out a situation that was already on edge. And every second that passed made it worse. Then came the warning, direct, unmistakable. If you don't step out, you will be arrested for obstruction. At that point, there's still a window, still a chance to correct it, to cooperate, to bring everything back down. But instead of taking that exit, King doubled down. More arguing, more resistance. And then he made a move that took the situation into completely different territory. He called his lawyer. Now pause for a second and really picture that. You're in the middle of a traffic stop. An officer is giving you lawful commands. The situation is already tense because of a visible weapon. And instead of complying, you try to negotiate through a phone call. It sounds unreal, but it happened. And here's the part that makes it even more intense. The lawyer told him the exact same thing the officer had been saying the entire time. Get out of the car. That's the moment reality should have clicked. No confusion, no gray area, no misunderstanding. But by then, the damage was already done. Because while that call was happening, the officer had reached a decision. The line had been crossed. The warnings had been ignored. And just like that, everything shifted. You are under arrest. No more chances. No more back and forth. The door opens, he's pulled from the vehicle, placed in handcuffs, and in that instant, the situation transforms completely. What started as a traffic stop is now a criminal case. And it doesn't stop there. Because once the arrest happens, the next step is inevitable, the search. And this is where everything collapses. Because inside that vehicle, it wasn't just the firearm. There were additional issues. A controlled substance, serious enough to bring felony-level consequences. A THC vape pen, another violation. Then the original reasons for the stop, speeding, seat belt issues. And on top of that, obstruction for refusing to comply. Charge after charge stacking, building, turning what could have been minor into something heavy. Take a second and really understand that shift. If he had stepped out of the car when asked, this likely ends with a ticket. Maybe a warning, maybe nothing major at all. But because he resisted, everything got exposed, everything escalated, everything became public. And that's the part that changes everything. Because this wasn't happening in the shadows. It was all captured on body cam, every word, every delay, every refusal, which means there's no controlling the narrative afterward. People don't have to guess what happened, they can see it. And once that footage exists, the internet takes over. But even before the reactions fully explode, there's another moment in this story that hits just as hard. Because once King is out of the car, once he's in custody, once the reality of the situation settles in, there's one person he turns to. Not the lawyer, not himself, his father. And within minutes, T.I. shows up. Now let's be clear, any father would show up for their son. That's no. The issue. The issue is how it looks in this specific moment. The timing, the contrast. Because this is the same person who had been online projecting strength, independence, fearlessness. Someone who had been publicly going after 50 Cent, speaking like he was ready for anything that came his way. But in the first real moment of pressure, when things weren't controlled, when it wasn't social media, when it wasn't performance, he needed immediate backup. And that contrast, that's what made everything explode. Because now the story isn't just about an arrest. It becomes about credibility, about image versus reality, about who someone says they are versus how they actually move when it matters. And the internet picks up on that instantly. Clips start circulating. People start analyzing every second. The refusal, the argument, the call, the arrest, the charges, the outfit. Everything becomes part of the narrative, and once that narrative forms, it moves fast. But just when it seems like the situation couldn't get worse, it does. Because after all of this, after the arrest, after the charges, after the footage, after the embarrassment, King doesn't go quiet. He doesn't step back. He doesn't try to let things cool down. Instead, he gets back online, posting, talking, comparing the police to cartoon villains, acting like the entire situation is a joke. And that decision, that's the second turning point. Because while he's online trying to laugh it off, trying to regain control of the narrative, there's someone else watching. Someone who had already been part of this story long before the arrest even happened. Someone who had been paying attention, waiting, letting everything build. 50 Cent. Now this is where things shift from messy to brutal. Because if you understand how 50 Cent operates, you already know this isn't random. He doesn't jump into situations without timing. He doesn't react emotionally. He waits. He observes. He lets people create their own downfall. And when the moment is right, he steps in. And King had already put himself on that radar. This wasn't out of nowhere. For weeks, King had been going at him, posting disrespectful content, crossing lines, saying things that most people wouldn't dare say, especially towards someone with a reputation like 50 Cent. And when you do that, when you push like that, you're not just starting a conversation, you're setting yourself up for a response. But the thing King didn't seem to understand is that with someone like 50 Cent, the response doesn't come when you expect it. It comes when it hurts the most. And this was that moment. Because now everything is aligned. The arrest, the footage, the charges, the public perception, the contrast between image and reality, it's all there, perfectly packaged. And when 50 Cent steps into a moment like that, he doesn't just comment, he amplifies it. He turns it into something bigger, louder, harder to escape. And once that happens, there's no controlling it. Because now it's not just about what happened during that traffic stop. It's about how it's being seen, how it's being shared, how it's being talked about. And when someone like 50 Cent starts engaging with it, the reach multiplies instantly. What was already a bad situation becomes a viral moment. What was already embarrassing becomes unavoidable. And what was already damaging becomes something that sticks. That's the part people underestimate. It's not always the mistake itself that defines the moment. It's how that mistake gets exposed, amplified, and remembered. And in this case, everything aligned in the worst possible way. Because this wasn't just a private incident. It wasn't something that could be handled quietly. It wasn't something that could be spun or reshaped. It was real, it was recorded, and it was public. And once the internet locks onto something like that, it doesn't let go. So now the story isn't just about a traffic stop. It's about a breakdown, a collapse of an image that had been built carefully over time, a moment where perception met reality and reality won. And standing right at the center of it all is King Harris, facing not just legal consequences, but something just as powerful in today's world, public judgment. Because once that shift happens, once people start seeing you differently, it's not easy to reverse. Not quickly, not quietly. And with 50 Cent now fully aware, fully engaged, and fully ready to respond, this situation isn't slowing down anytime soon. If anything, it's just getting started. Because while King Harris was online trying to laugh it off, posting like nothing serious had just happened, someone else was watching every second of it. Not reacting, not jumping in, just watching. And if you understand how 50 Cent moves, you already know that silence isn't random, it's strategy. He saw everything, every detail from the stop, every moment of hesitation, every contradiction between the image King had been projecting and what people were now seeing with their own eyes, and he didn't rush to respond. That's not his style. He waits, he studies, he lets the moment build until it's impossible to ignore. And then when the timing is perfect, he strikes. This time it wasn't just a response, it was a full-on public dismantling. Because the second that arrest footage started circulating, the second people saw King in handcuffs after weeks of talking tough, 50 Cent stepped in. And what he did next didn't just get attention, it sent the entire internet into chaos. No long explanation, no drawn-out back and forth, just one post. But that post, it hit harder than anything else could have. Instead of arguing, he mocked, directly, publicly, and most importantly, strategically. He didn't focus on the charges. He didn't break down the legal side. He zoomed in on the one detail that visually destroyed everything King had been trying to build. The outfit. The Pikachu onesie. And that's where the situation went from serious to unforgettable. Because think about the contrast for a second. On one side, you've got someone who had been online presenting himself as fearless, talking like a street figure, throwing shots at one of the most calculated figures in hip-hop, acting like nothing could touch him. And then suddenly, he's getting arrested, wearing a cartoon costume. That image alone did more damage than any argument ever could. And 50 Cent knew it. So instead of over-explaining, he leaned into it. Hard. He turned that moment into something the internet could grab instantly, a joke, a meme, a visual contradiction that didn't need context. And just like that, the entire narrative shifted. Now it wasn't just about what happened. It was about how it looked. And the internet, they ran with it immediately. Within minutes, everything exploded. Clips started spreading across every platform, screenshots, zoom-ins, slow-motion breakdowns, people analyzing every second, every reaction, every expression. But more than anything, they were laughing. Because the contrast was too strong to ignore. One viral comment summed it up perfectly. From threatening 50 Cent to getting arrested in a Pikachu suit, this can't be real. Another one hit even harder. He went from gangster to Pokemon in 24 hours. And just like that, the story stopped being serious. It became a spectacle. But here's where it gets deeper, because while people were laughing, they were also noticing something else, something that hit beyond jokes. The moment he called his father. Because one of the biggest talking points wasn't just the arrest itself, it was what happened after. The call to T.I., the fact that he had to show up in the middle of the night to try and handle the situation. Now again, there's nothing wrong with a father showing up. That's not the issue. The issue is the contrast. Because this is the same person who had been online talking like he didn't need anyone, acting independent, acting untouchable, trying to separate himself from that exact identity. But in the moment where things got real, he reached for the one person he was trying to outgrow. And the internet noticed immediately. Because now it didn't look like support. It looked like dependence. And 50 Cent, he saw that angle instantly. Because this wasn't just about clowning King. It was about exposing a contradiction. And once that contradiction is visible, it spreads faster than anything else. The narrative shifted overnight. You talk tough until things get real. You act independent until you need saving. That message hit harder than any joke. And suddenly, people weren't just laughing anymore. They were analyzing, breaking things down, asking uncomfortable questions. Is this real or just an image? Has he been protected too many times? Is this a pattern? Because once credibility cracks, everything gets questioned. Everything. And in King's case, that's exactly what happened. People started looking back at past situations differently. Previous incidents, previous moments that didn't fully explode, but now made more sense. It started to feel less like a one-time mistake and more like a pattern building in real time. And that's when things shifted from entertaining to uncomfortable. Because now this wasn't just about one bad night. It was about accountability, or the lack of it. But just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, he made another move. Instead of going quiet, he stayed active. Posting, talking, trying to control the narrative. Comparing the police to cartoon villains, making light of the situation, acting like it wasn't serious. And that decision, it backfired instantly. Because now it didn't look like confidence. It looked like denial. And the internet can tell the difference. You could see the shift in real time. The tone of the comments changed. Less jokes, more criticism. Bro, just take accountability. This isn't funny anymore. You're making it worse. And when the audience turns like that, you know the situation has gone too far. Because the real turning point wasn't the arrest. It wasn't even 50 Cent's post. It was the realization that came after. Once everything settled, after the memes, after the reactions, after the noise, people started seeing the bigger picture. This wasn't just trolling. This wasn't just embarrassment. This was exposure. Exposure of a gap between image and reality. Because when you strip everything away, the posts, the persona, the tough talk, what's left is the truth. And in that moment, the truth didn't match the image. What people saw wasn't someone in control. It was someone overwhelmed. Someone in trouble. Someone facing consequences they couldn't talk their way out of. And that realization hit harder than anything else. Because now the story wasn't funny anymore. It was real. And the consequences, they were just getting started. But it didn't stop there. Because once the clip spread, once 50 Cent made his move, once the internet locked in, this turned into something bigger than just one moment. It became a full-scale online war. Every platform lit up. TikTok flooded with breakdowns and reactions. YouTube filled with commentary videos, analyzing every detail. Twitter X turned into a battlefield of opinions, debates, and non-stop posts. And right in the center of it all, King Harris. One side of the internet didn't hold back at all. To them, this wasn't just a mistake. It was a complete shutdown. You can't threaten 50 Cent, then get arrested in a Pikachu suit calling your dad. It's over. That's the worst timing I've ever seen. 50 didn't even have to try. People pointed out the irony from every angle. The tough talk, the refusal during the stop, the call for help, the viral post, the response. All of it stacked together into one moment that felt almost unreal. And that's what made it so powerful. Because this wasn't just about what happened. It was about how perfectly everything lined up in the worst possible way. And once a moment like that hits the internet, it doesn't fade. It sticks. It gets replayed. It gets remembered. And just like that, what started as a late-night traffic stop turned into something much bigger, a viral moment, a public lesson, and a situation that's still unfolding. And the craziest part, this might not even be the peak yet. To some people, this whole situation felt like a perfect storm, everything lining up at the worst possible time. The arrest, the footage, the outfit, the online persona, and then 50 Cent stepping in at exactly the right moment. From that perspective, he didn't even have to try. He just had to press post. But not everyone was laughing. Because almost immediately, another side of the internet pushed back, and they pushed back hard. To them, this wasn't entertainment. It was a real situation involving a young person making mistakes in public. Their argument was simple but powerful. This went too far. Yes, King Harris messed up. Yes, the situation looked bad, but turning it into a global joke, turning a legal issue into memes, that didn't sit right with everyone. Some people pointed out the obvious. He's young. People make mistakes. The internet has a way of taking one moment and stretching it into something permanent. Others took it a step further, saying this should have been about accountability, not humiliation. Because there's a difference between holding someone responsible and turning them into a punchline. And just like that, the narrative split in two. On one side, people saw it as deserved. Actions have consequences. You can't talk tough, provoke someone like 50 Cent, and then expect silence when things fall apart publicly. On the other side, people saw it as excessive. A mistake turned into a spectacle. A situation that should have stayed serious turned into something people were laughing at. But then the conversation shifted again, and this time it went deeper. Because suddenly, it wasn't just about King Harris anymore. It became about his parents, specifically T.I. and Tiny. And that's where things got uncomfortable. People started asking questions that go beyond one night, beyond one arrest. Questions about patterns, about upbringing, about accountability. Has he been enabled too much? Why does he keep ending up in situations like this? At what point does it stop being a mistake and start becoming a cycle? Some defended T.I. immediately. You can't control everything your child does. At the end of the day, people make their own decisions. A parent can guide, support, even step in, but they can't live someone else's life for them. Others weren't as forgiving. They pointed out that this wasn't the first incident, that there had been moments before, moments that didn't explode like this but still raised questions. And when those moments start stacking up, the conversation changes. It's no longer about one bad decision. It's about a pattern. And once that word enters the discussion, pattern, everything feels heavier. Because now people aren't just reacting to what happened. They're trying to understand why it keeps happening. And just like that, the focus expanded. This wasn't just about an arrest anymore. It became about lifestyle, about influence, about the environment someone grows up in and how that shapes their choices. Then came the next layer. Influencers, bloggers, reaction channels. Everyone with a platform had something to say, and their takes completely mixed. Some stood firmly with 50 Cent. Their perspective was blunt. Don't start something you can't finish. If you step into a public feud, especially with someone known for how he responds, you have to be ready for the consequences. Others took a more reflective angle. They weren't focused on the jokes or the trolling. They focused on the disconnect, the gap between image and reality, how someone can build a persona online that doesn't hold up when tested in real life. And then there were those who stayed neutral, watching, waiting, saying the same thing over and over again. Let's see how this plays out legally. Because no matter which side people were on, everyone agreed on one thing. This situation was bigger than it looked. Because here's the reality. In today's world, perception is everything. And right now, King Harris's image took a serious hit. The same audience that once saw confidence, boldness, fearlessness, is now seeing something else. Inconsistency, poor judgment, a lack of preparation for real-life consequences. And once that doubt enters people's minds, it spreads fast. That's when the most important questions started showing up everywhere. What happens next? Because this isn't just about the internet. This isn't just about memes, reactions, or viral moments. This is real life, real charges, real consequences. And depending on how things unfold, this could affect everything: his career, his reputation, his future. And right now, no one has a clear answer. But one thing is certain: this story isn't over, not even close. Because just when it feels like everything has already happened, there's always another twist, another development, another moment that shifts the entire narrative again. And that's exactly what started happening. Because as the noise slowly began to settle, fewer memes, fewer jokes, fewer viral clips, something changed, quietly, but powerfully. People started focusing on something deeper. This isn't just internet drama. This is a legal situation. A serious one. Because when King Harris stepped out of that car in handcuffs, that moment didn't end when the video stopped. That wasn't the conclusion, that was the beginning. Because now there are charges, real ones: felony possession, obstruction, traffic violations, all stacking together. And here's the part that changes everything. The legal system doesn't care about image. It doesn't care about followers. It doesn't care who your father is. And that realization, that's what hit people the hardest. Because for the first time, it started to feel like this might not just go away. No quick reset, no easy fix, no disappearing act where everything fades after a few weeks. Because when patterns build up, consequences follow. And in this case, people are watching closely to see if this moment gets treated differently, more seriously, more strictly. Because if it does, this isn't just about one night anymore. It's about everything moving forward. His career, his reputation, his future. And while all of that is unfolding, there's still one shadow hanging over the entire situation: 50 Cent. Not constantly posting, not reacting every second, but present. Watching. And that matters. Because he doesn't need to keep talking. The moment already speaks for itself. The contrast is already there. And the internet, they're not letting it go anytime soon. Every update brings the conversation right back. Back to that night. Back to that stop. Back to that moment where everything shifted. And here's the part that no one can ignore. Because even as King continues posting, continues trying to move forward, continues acting like everything is under control, people aren't fully buying it anymore. Because once doubt enters the picture, it doesn't leave easily. And right now, there's a lot of doubt. About the decisions, about the behavior, about what happens next. Which leads to the biggest question of all. Is this a turning point? Or just another chapter? Because it could go either way. This could be the moment where everything changes, where lessons are learned, where a new direction begins. Or it could be another step in a pattern that keeps repeating. And that uncertainty, that's what keeps this story alive. Because right now, nothing is resolved. Nothing is final. Nothing is clear. And until something definitive happens, this situation stays open, unfinished, waiting. Because the next move, that's what will define everything. So now, after everything you've seen, everything you've heard, here's the real question. What do you think? No filters, no holding back. Did King Harris finally get a reality check? Or is this just another moment that's going to fade like nothing ever happened? And what about 50 Cent? Did he go too far? Or did he just say what everyone was already thinking? Because when you look at the full picture, the tough talk, the public tension, the arrest, the refusal to comply, and then calling T.I. to step in, it raises real questions. About accountability. About image versus reality. About what happens when things stop being online and start becoming real life. Drop your thoughts, because this isn't just a story anymore, it's a conversation. And it's not over. Not even close. More updates could drop at any moment. More reactions, more developments. And if things escalate legally, this could get even bigger than it already is. So stay ready. Because the next twist, it might change everything all over again.